With the regular season wrapped up, San Francisco was able to clinch a first-round bye, and while much has been made of CMC's and Brock Purdy's great performances this year, the real backbone of this team has to be their defensive line. I mean, when you look at it, they have first-rounders all across the board. And while first-round picks are nice, in this recent game against the LA Rams, I think we got a glimpse at another steal in the 5th round for San Francisco, that being Robert Beal Jr. on the defensive line. Beal, who was recently activated off IR, was able to register his first career sack in this most recent performance. But who is Robert Beal Jr.? In this video, I want to examine his career up to this point, as well as his most recent game, to examine where he fits with San Francisco's defensive line exactly, and if he could be a contributor going forward. Starting out with probably Robert Beal Jr.'s best attributes, and that's his physical attributes. He comes in at 6'4", 250 pounds, he has an arm length of nearly 35 inches, but maybe more impressively was his 40-yard dash and 10-yard split. His 40-yard dash was 4.48 seconds, and his 10-yard split was 1.62 seconds. For San Francisco's defensive line scheme, Robert Beal Jr. really couldn't have a better athletic profile, maybe a little bit more weight, but his get-off time is insane. When you look at Christian McCaffrey's, his 10-yard split is 1.55 seconds, meaning Robert Beal Jr., who's 40 pounds heavier, is only 0.07 seconds slower than Christian McCaffrey for his first 10 yards. The ability of San Francisco's defensive line to get off the ball is so important, they came up with their own metric for it, GTFO, and as you guys probably guessed by now, Robert Beal Jr. led the entire NCAA in GTFO, meaning he has the quickest first step of any defensive lineman in this last draft class. Before we dive right into Beal's college career though, we need to examine his high school career. He grew up in Duluth, Georgia, and initially attended Norcross High School before transferring to IMG, and then transferred back to Georgia for Peachtree Ridge High School. Despite being transferred all over the place though, Robert Beal Jr. was honestly an absolute stud in high school. He was a 5-star recruit and had offers from North Carolina State, Alabama, Georgia, and basically just had his choice where to go. Ultimately, he did decide his home state of Georgia. During his time at Georgia though, the biggest challenge for Beal would actually be getting on the field. Despite being a 5-star recruit, it really took him about 4 years to break into the Bulldogs' deep defensive line rotation. In whole, from 2018 to 2020 for instance, Robert Beal Jr. only had 1 sack and 23 tackles. When Beal finally received his opportunity to play consistently in 2021 though, he never looked back. He surpassed all these stats, having 23 tackles on the year, 2 passes deflected, and 6.5 sacks. That led the national champions. The following year, once again, Georgia would repeat the national championship. This time, Robert Beal Jr. saw the field 15 times and had 26 tackles as well as 3 sacks. With Robert Beal Jr.'s final season at college wrapped up, he decided to enter the 2023 NFL Draft, and scouts had the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into Robert Beal Jr.'s game, and they saw some positives as well as negatives. Starting out with Robert Beal Jr.'s positives the scouts saw. First of all, they loved his wingspan of nearly 7 feet and his ability to get off the ball quickly. Robert Beal Jr., despite being more of an edge rush piece, also did a great job at setting the edge against the run. But there were also negatives on the film for scouts. Most notably, there just wasn't too much film for Robert Beal Jr. He only received 10 starts across his time at Georgia, and while he was a rotational pass rush piece at this time, many scouts just wondered why it took him so long to break into the starting lineup. In addition to this, some of Robert Beal Jr.'s pass rush moves weren't very refined. Specifically, he struggled to use his hands proactively in pass rush moves. Where other teams might have seen limitations in Robert Beal Jr.'s game, San Francisco saw Robert Beal Jr. as the perfect moldable ball of clay for Chris Kaczmarek. Chris Kaczmarek is by and far the best defensive line coach across the entire NFL. And he's turned around several guys' careers, including Kerry Hyder. So with Robert Beal Jr., Kaczmarek understood how to address Robert Beal Jr.'s lack of refinement, but also what he could become on San Francisco's defensive line. And San Francisco selected Robert Beal Jr. in the 5th round of the 2023 NFL Draft. Initially at training camp, Beal was kind of going off, but he was injured and was placed on IR August 30th, 2023. Recently he was activated November 27th though, has really been working his way back to see what we saw in this recent LA Rams game. And there were really 3 plays that impressed me in this Rams game. Starting out with this one, Robert Beal Jr. is working on the bottom of the screen. But I'm not really going to pay attention to pass rush moves here, but rather his motor. He's able to identify where the ball's going and actually is able to help get this ball carrier down. But this wasn't the only heads-up play by Robert Beal Jr. Here, facing a zone read, I love how Robert Beal Jr. reads this perfectly. He gets contained on Carson Wentz so he doesn't pull it out, and then slides inwards to make the tackle on the running back. On this play, what's most impressive to me is Robert Beal Jr. was able to stop both guys, Carson Wentz as well as the running back. Essentially, he blew up this play by himself. Moving on to the biggest play for Robert Beal Jr. and the reason San Francisco drafted him, we can see how this is basically all just his athletic profile. The tackle just decides not to block Robert Beal Jr., so he's right in Carson Wentz's face. And while many defensive ends won't be able to make this play on an athletic guy like Carson Wentz, Robert Beal Jr. does. So now that we've got our first extended look at Robert Beal Jr., what can we realistically expect for him for the rest of this year and the rest of his contract with San Francisco? For the rest of this year, he might actually see an expanded role. Clelin Ferrell could miss a playoff game with a knee injury, so Robert Beal Jr. could definitely rotate in there. And as we look forward, Robert Beal Jr. could really cement himself as a rotational pass rush piece. Guys like Randy Gregory and Clelin Ferrell probably won't be brought back. But with Robert Beal Jr. under contract for the next several years, I could continue to see him improve under Chris Kaceric's tutelage. But ultimately, these are just my thoughts on Robert Beal Jr., and I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. It would also mean a ton to me if you liked and subscribed, and as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.